This is the first in a set of 3 sound recordings for the play What It Means We Evolved, dialogue between Darwin and Galileo, a play with 2 characters in 3 30-minute acts. My name is Sean Johnston. I'm the author, and I'll be reading both characters. To find out more, check out evolvedself.com. Act 1. Hello. I'm Charles Darwin. Of course, I'm dead, so usually I'm up there. But I used to be down here, remember? I got caught up in a remarkable revolution involving one of the greatest discoveries of all time, that all living creatures, including us, had evolved. And from up there, this revolution seemed to be going along just fine. However, the other day some bold new thinking came my way, and I was persuaded you should be told, so I thought it best I come back down to tell you all about it. Oh, where to begin? It all seems so complicated now. I was up there, looking down here actually, as I usually do, when I had a visitor. And it was in conversation with this visitor that the bold new thinking came up that I want to tell you about. First, though, I had to tell my visitor about the revolution I was involved in and the role I played in it. You may already know all about that. But I think it's worth reminding you. So I'll just tell you how the conversation went, from start to finish. Just the way it happened. Yes. Okay. I say hello. Don't see many of you guys here at the edge. No, well, if I hadn't drawn the short straw, I wouldn't be here. I like to be over there, with the bocce, the wine, good company, music, know what I mean? You're Charles Darwin, right? You're the fellow who never stops looking down there. That's why my companion sent me over, to find out what you find so interesting down there. And I'm Galileo Galilei. Galileo? Goodness, you're one of my heroes. Yeah, well, I don't like to talk about it too much. I cared a bit at first, kept looking down like we all do to see what happens after we die. Then I lost interest and decided to just have a good time like everyone else. What year is it down there now? Oh, it's 2013. Your revolution in physics, that's about 4 centuries ago. Revolution I was involved with in evolution came about 2 centuries after that, around 2 centuries ago. Evolution? I stopped paying attention about 3 centuries ago. What's this evolution? Oh, it's a totally new origin story. After you died, we went on discovering new continents. Everywhere we went, all over the earth, we kept on finding new species of living creatures we'd never seen before. The great question of the day became, where had all these species come from? We found the answer by digging down for the bones of the ancestors of today's living creatures to where they first appeared. This led us to 2 very important discoveries. First, species weren't eternal. They'd come into existence, and after 1 million years or so, most of them would go extinct. And second, each species of living creatures started out right where the species most like it already lived. They seemed to grow out of one another, forming strings of species that fanned out like the twigs of a tree. Trace those twigs back, and you could imagine finding all living creatures having sprouted off from one original trunk. So species were not each one specially created by God. Instead, they seemed to spawn each other. To distinguish that from creation, we called it evolution. Now, that is revolutionary indeed. Oh, how ever did you manage to get out word of such a heresy? Oh, it wasn't that hard. The British public first learnt about it from a book titled Vestiges of the Natural History of Creation. Vestiges, we called it. Did cause a tremendous hullabaloo. The author published it anonymously, went to his grave without telling anyone. That's how controversial it was. But within a few years, evolution was being shouted from the housetops from one end of the country to the other. All that remained to be done was to figure out what it all meant. Ha ha ha! What it all meant! Ha ha! No special creation! Ha ha ha! I'm sure the church fathers had an interest in what that meant. Well, that may have been why this Vestiges fellow made evolution God's work. Here's what he said. All living creatures develop from embryos. All embryos develop through the same set of stages. Some creatures, like fish, go through just the first few. Others, such as mammals, go through several more. So the specifications for all living creatures were already there in the original embryo, he said, each kind of creature ready to emerge when the right conditions came along. And where had that original embryo come from? From God, he said. God created it and then let it evolve. And that's how God created all living creatures, including us. An entirely new origin story, and this Vestiges fellow gives the credit to God, shielding the process from prying eyes. I hope someone had the courage to come up with something a little more scientific. Well, that would be me. I was one of England's first converts to an entirely new way of thinking about science called positivism. It was a scheme for practicing science on a purely material basis, all experiment and measurement, nothing supernatural permitted at all. To be a scientist meant seeing the entire world as purely physical. I was spellbound. I had already come across evolution during my studies in Edinburgh. Now, about half a dozen years before Vestiges got published, I dedicated myself to coming up with a purely physical account of evolution. Bravo! I salute you. So tell me about the idea you came up with. I got the idea from one of the most advanced technologies of my time. Artificial selection, how breeders improve their livestock, pigs, cows, that sort of thing. They let only creatures with desirable variations breed, so those variations would become more common in future generations. Nature, I realized, already did something like that. Most creatures die young. Only a few live long enough to reproduce. Now, I asked myself, what variations was nature selecting for? What variations would most help creatures survive long enough to breed? I realized it would be variations making creatures better adapted to their environment. Once enough of those variations had accumulated, the species would amount to a new species, much better adapted to the environment than the old one. Evolution, without any appeal to gods or spirits at all. I call this mechanism natural selection. Oh, you're British. It's a joke. Oh, that's very amusing. No, it wasn't a joke. It was serious. Oh, I'm sorry, but I can't see that working. Well, it's only a very slight tendency. You see the effects only over hundreds of thousands of generations. In a single generation, its effect would be negligible. There'd be nothing to see working. Well, anyway, you had your theory. So if you were so smart, so early, why wasn't it you who published a book introducing the British public to evolution? Well, I was a naturalist, not a scientist. I hesitated to associate my family name with something as controversial as that. I showed it to some friends, and they weren't very impressed, so I put the idea aside. And a few years later, when Vestiges got published, I was glad I'd let someone else take the heat, because there was a lot of heat, believe me. But something did eventually make you publish. Ah, I know. Someone else came up with the same idea. Well, yes. About 15 years after Vestiges got published, this young fellow, Alfred Wallace, comes up with exactly the same mechanism and submits it for publication. Shook me up, I can tell you. So we published together. But I was older, and after spending 8 years studying barnacles, shellfish, you know, I was better known than he was, so it was my book that drew the most attention. I called it On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. It was really about just natural selection. But because I presented evolution without any mention of God at all, the fuss over Vestiges spread to my book, as if people began talking about Darwin's theory of evolution, as if I'd invented the whole thing in the first place. No, I'd just come up with a purely physical origin for living creatures. A purely physical origin for living creatures? Were you taking credit for an idea we had already come up with centuries before, that all plants and animals are simply machines? So how was your confirmation of our bold surmise received? It was accepted as entirely original. By this time, the new way of doing science had pretty much taken over, so a purely physical mechanism for evolution was welcomed. At least by scientists. Of course they welcomed it. The reverence people had for God for having created all living creatures, that glory would now go to them, practitioners of your new science. And to add to that glory, I'm sure they hailed you as the greatest scientist of your age. Well, no. What little acclaim there was very short-lived. In fact, after I died, it looked as if natural selection might be abandoned. The problem wasn't selection, it was variation. For natural selection to go on working, it had to be kept fed with a continuous supply of new variations to go on selecting from. I just assumed it would be. But no one could figure out where those variations would come from. And without them, people said, natural selection couldn't be what drove evolution, and they began looking elsewhere. So much for your pretty theory taken from pig breeding. So much for evolution. Oh, evolution wasn't being abandoned. It was only my strictly scientific sort of mechanism that was in question. It was clear that we had evolved. Evolutionary thinking continued to spread. According to Vestiges, already laid down in the embryo could be specifications for creatures even more spiritually advanced than us, intended by God from the beginning to come after us and carry his plan to the next level. Speculation about what sorts of creatures those might be led to new kinds of spiritualism. Spiritualism, even that served people better than your new science. Ha! Well, actually, about half a century after I died, scientists did discover a new and purely physical source of variation. They revived my theory of natural selection, combined it with this new source of variation in what they called the modern synthesis, and to make this modern synthesis really scientific, they translated it into math. What kind of scientist leaves it to others to translate his ideas into maths? Oh, well. What was this purely physical source of variation that rescued your sorry mechanism from oblivion? If you're going to be so dismissive, I've a good mind not to tell you. But that wouldn't be right. This new source of variation had to do with molecules, long strings of atoms to you, in the nucleus of each cell of our bodies called genes. They're the blueprints that distinguish one species of living creatures from another. Turns out it's these genes, and not vestiges God, that tells the embryo how to develop, all the way from the single cell to the full-grown adult. Of course, long, complex molecules like that are bound to decay, and that was the new source of variation. The random damage genes accumulate as they decay. Random damage to the blueprints for living creatures, the key to life? I don't think so. What nonsense. What makes it work is natural selection. Every once in a while, just by chance, the result of that damage is bound to be an improvement. Natural selection will keep selecting in favor of each of those improvements, those favorable genes, until there's enough of them to provide some entirely new benefit, like an elephant's trunk, or legs turning into flippers. Once again, natural selection was helping account for evolution on a purely physical basis. I was thrilled to see it persuading more and more scientists to embrace the new science. And then, to see the materialist philosophy spreading out from the scientific community to society at large. Seeing my life work contribute to the march of this materialist philosophy, that's what keeps me looking down there. Galileo seemed to be having some kind of a fit. While we wait for him to recover, I'm going to take a little break. When I come back, I'll tell you how the conversation continued. What it means we evolved, Act 2. He grabs about in the dirt, uncovers fragments of bone that, under his fingers, without him having any talent for real science, turn into ingots of gold. And now everyone celebrates his name. Shouldn't every great scientist live in such an age, when science has become the object of public veneration? With my genius for logic and maths, what glory could I not win for myself down there now? Where could I find someone to represent me down there, to dazzle those gullible multitudes? Anyone. Oh, maybe this naturalist, this barnacle collector. Given such a messenger, what must my message be? It has to be something that will advance his revolution, something to amaze and shock his audience. It can only be a new mechanism of evolution. Of this evolution I know nothing. I will need a fully staffed library. Oh, maybe I can use him for that too. ho, ho, ho! What fun I can have with him! Ah. How can I get him to act as my librarian, to put the key to the library into my hand? I'll begin by engaging him where he feels he is in control, the master, this new science of his. Then I'll draw him into a contest where mastery and control actually lie with me. My specialty, logic. First, I must make some amends and butter him up. Mr. Darwin, I beg you, do pardon me if I have seemed insufficiently appreciative of your life's work, and how much you have contributed to the advance of the new science, and the success of your revolution. Oh, very gracious of you. Thank you. How I wish I had the insight into the human condition that you, through your accomplishments, have won for yourself. Here's something I would love to know. With God entirely out of the business of creation, with all of nature having a purely physical origin, where do we humans come from? Oh, only too happy to oblige. The truth is, we evolved too, from a line of monkeys, that sort of thing. In only a few million years, we're just one more evolved species. But what about our mental powers, our capacities of mind, consciousness, free will? Oh, that's all changed completely since your day. In our new material philosophy, there are no mental powers. We're purely physical, like everything else in the universe. All our thinking happens in the brain as chemistry. Consciousness is simply that chemistry becoming aware of itself somehow. But it can't do anything. All our decisions are made for us in the brain. Your sense of having free will, that's just an illusion. We're no different from other animals. We just have bigger brains. So, this new way of practicing science, this material philosophy you speak of, it denies us mind? Well, yes. What you call mind, that's not physical, so it's supernatural. We'd never have achieved so much if we hadn't banished mind from our new science. That's what's led to such astonishing progress. And to origin stories not needing to account for where mind comes from. What a triumph for your new science! About this modern synthesis, there can be no doubt of its truth? Oh, no, it's all been proved beyond any shadow of a doubt. It's purely scientific. Amazing! How impressive your science is! How far it has advanced beyond my understanding! Yet, how I would love to speculate about our origins as you do. Would you indulge the fancy of a once famous scientist? Suppose I came up with a couple of questions about this synthesis that you couldn't answer. Would you do me the honor of joining me as I scout around for an alternative? So you could go on believing in dualism? Mind and matter existing independently? No one at all believes in that anymore. It just can't be made to work. Remember Wallace, my co-discoverer of natural selection? He said the capabilities we associate with civilization, the arts and the sciences, developed too quickly for natural selection to account for them. So off he went looking for an alternative. Smart fellow. But look where he ended up. Spiritualism. Made a laughing stock of himself, poor fellow. Okay, I've always been a huge admirer of yours. I can't deny you a hearing, so go ahead. Ask your questions. Oh, and yes, if I can't answer them myself, I promise I'll join you in looking for alternatives. I don't think you'll succeed, but try your best. Thank you. He's handed me the key to the library. Now to turn it in the lock. Let's start with your new source of variation. You damage at random the blueprint for a very, very complicated machine, a living creature. Every once in a while, inevitably just by chance. The variation you end up with will be favorable. But much more often, variations resulting from random damage to such a blueprint will be harmful. Won't there be very many more harmful than favorable variations in every generation? Oh, yes, but natural selection takes care of them. They don't count. But according to you, in a single generation, the effect of natural selection is negligible. Maybe for each favorable variation it selects for, it can eliminate one variation that's harmful. But that will still leave many more harmful than favorable variations in every generation, and as these harmful variations accumulate generation after generation, as more harm accumulates than benefit, will not the result be extinction rather than evolution? Oh, that's all been accounted for in the math. I don't understand it, but everyone says it works. But you didn't need math to come up with natural selection in the first place. You understood it well enough to publish a book about it. Now, that natural selection that you came up with, do you believe it could identify and eliminate every single harmful variation in every generation, while leaving only the occasional variations that are favorable, that you need for evolution to occur? Do you think it can do that? I never did take the trouble to understand the math they translated it into. But of course no one else did either. Once it's a matter of statistics, you just take their word for it. Well, I suppose I have to admit I can't answer that one. I don't know the math. What's the other question? All that's needed to make an elephant's trunk, you said, is enough damaged but favorable genes. I think you may have left something out. Think what you are asking of the living creature. It must take all those genes, each one remaining selected for some particular benefit it alone provides, and re-engineer them into machinery so perfect that together they now provide some entirely new benefit, even something as complex and intricate as an elephant's trunk, not just in the adult, but at every stage of development along the way. What an amazing feat of engineering that is, out of such crude and unpromising materials as mere damaged genes. to fashion such exquisite machinery. So here's my second question. Why do you need some other mechanism to damage those genes at random in the first place? If those genes needed to be damaged first, the creature clearly has enough engineering capability to damage them itself, just the ones it wants, whenever it wants. No, you've got it all backwards. There's no re-engineering of genes required. The genes don't need to be selected for something else first, and then re-engineered for their role in the machinery. They arrive already precisely engineered for their role in the machinery, exactly when they're needed. I know this will all be new to you. Through random damage followed by selection for the occasional chance improvement, you can engineer genes as precisely as you want, provided you allow enough time. Could be millions, could be billions of years. Oh, but then you can't also guarantee they'll be ready exactly when they're needed. Oh, that won't work. I think you're right. I must have left something out. Well, I'll just have to think it up right now. Oh, I can't do this on the spur of the moment. Oh, I can't answer that question either. Oh, you win. I still believe in the modern synthesis. I just haven't kept up properly. But I did promise if I couldn't answer your questions myself, I'd join you in a search for an alternative. I promised. So I will. You British, how gracious in defeat you are. Yes, I win. The library doors are open. Let's enter and begin the construction of a new mechanism of evolution. Mr. Darwin, here's what we'll do. I'll ask you what your modern theory of evolution cannot account for. Then, from what you tell me, I'll figure out something else to put in its place. Okay? I suppose so. I did promise. Good. Let's begin. Tell me something natural selection cannot account for. What do you mean? It can account for everything. That's what makes it so powerful. No, there must be something it can't account for. Think. Well, obviously, it can't account for how the first living creatures evolved, because until they'd evolved and begun reproducing through successive generations, there'd be nothing for natural selection to work on. Problem is, though, we know nothing about how the first living creatures evolved, so we have to look elsewhere where we do have some information. Oh, do we indeed? We have to look elsewhere than where the obvious solution is. Let's not do that. Let's look exactly there. Tell me, Mr. Darwin, how long did it take for the first living creatures to evolve? Oh, it seems to have happened really fast, in something like 100 million years. Whew. And how much of all of evolution is this 100 million years? Well, let's see. Evolution's been going on for 4 billion years, so 100 million is 1/40th. And how difficult must it have been for those first living creatures to evolve, do you think? Oh, colossally difficult. Just starting from chemicals, you know. to make living creatures able to sustain, grow, reproduce themselves. Awesomely difficult. Okay, let me think. So, obviously, for life to begin, something, a process or a handful of processes, must have become a great deal more capable, smarter than the simple chemistry it started as. Now, if these processes could get smart enough to create the first living creatures in just 100 million years, what could they not do in 40 times as long? So, to account for evolution, you need know nothing more than whatever it was that created the first living creatures in 100 million years, and then follow it as it continued to get smarter at that same rate, overcoming ever greater challenges, developing ever greater capabilities. And you know such a process, able to get smarter, does exist. Else life could not have got off the ground, and you and I could not be standing here today.
Well, that's no help. If we can't find out how the first living creatures evolved, that means we'll never learn how evolution works.
Don't be so easily discouraged. We've all the rest of evolution to look at for clues to what that original process was. Already we found out something about it. It wasn't natural selection. So tell me, what happened next that your modern synthesis cannot account for?
Well, it says evolution can proceed only in tiny steps. But about halfway along, a couple of billion years ago, an entirely new kind of cell pops up out of nowhere. It wasn't like the simple bacterial cell that was common then. It was the kind of cell we're made of, highly complex with a nucleus. How can I picture this for you? It was as if everyone's plodding along, and suddenly a whole city rises up and soars off into space. There'd never been any jump like that before. And there hasn't been one that big since. That was no tiny step.
So, whatever it is that's driving evolution 1 billion, 2 billion years ago, it comes of age, becomes aware of its powers, and celebrates with a show of fireworks. Now, it's come to maturity. What does it do next?
Well, if you take time since then, about 2/3 of the way along, dozens of different kinds of complicated creatures suddenly pop up, all within a few tens of millions of years. A flash, really. All the major divisions of animals, like insects, snails, creatures like us with backbones, nothing like each other. And there haven't been any more such radically different kinds of creatures created since.
You know, this sounds like one of us, an inventor, a tinkerer. I've got an idea. Hey presto, 2,000 new kinds of living creatures. And that's it. Now he turns to something else. Tell me something else about these new creatures your synthesis cannot account for.
Well, there's the problem of the missing intermediates. Select any two species of living creatures. If they're quite similar, you're likely to find quite a lot of species intermediate between them. But the less alike they are, the fewer intermediates you tend to find between them, until, between fish and amphibia, reptiles and birds, you find almost none. If the same process of tiny steps was at work everywhere, you'd expect just the opposite. Lots more intermediate species spanning the bigger jumps.
So when our tinkerer applies himself, he can in one go create entirely new kinds of creatures. Very resourceful is our tinkerer. Now, who is he? Mr. Darwin, where could our tinkerer be?
Well, what you call your tinkerer, there's only two places he can be. In living creatures themselves, or in their environment, as I proposed. Or some kind of god, I suppose, like in Vestiges.
What about those genes you mentioned, those blueprints for life? Tell me more about them.
Well, they come joined all together end to end to make even longer molecules, the chromosomes. All those chromosomes make up what we call the genome. That's all the genes a creature has. You only get to see that when a cell divides. All the chromosomes come together, they stay together for a while, then they all simultaneously divide and separate, and two new cells form around them. That's how creatures grow and reproduce.
And this genome? How long has it been around?
Well, there's always new ones, every time a cell divides. On the other hand, I suppose you could say it's been around since life first began, since it keeps on duplicating itself, and as creatures evolved, it just kept growing longer.
As creatures evolved, it just kept growing longer. Could this be our tinkerer? Let's check him out. Those first living creatures, how many genes must their genomes have consisted of?
Oh, I don't know exactly, but it must be hundreds. To be able to survive, digest things, grow, reproduce, hundreds.
What must it have taken for those hundreds of genes of the first living creatures to be assembled out of a soup of chemicals and to be strung together?
I've no idea, and nor does anybody else. I've already told you that.
How could such a string of atoms have developed the first glimmers of its intelligence?
Oh, my God, that would amount to intelligent design. You can't bring that in. You'd never get anywhere down there if you could be accused of believing in intelligent design.
How sweet it is for me to know so little that I have no fear of this intelligent design. Yes, I am proposing an intelligent designer. Let's get to know it a little better. Tell me, Mr. Darwin, what would happen when such a creature thinks?
I want to make it perfectly clear I don't approve of this line of inquiry, making any connection between evolution and intelligence or thinking. It's entirely against my principles.
But you promised me.
Oh, yes, so I did. All right, I'll go along. I assume as this creature thinks, it will make changes in a brain of some kind, like we do. When we want to remember something like someone's name, we lay down memories as chemical changes in brain cells.
And the genome is made up of genes? And what do genes do?
Well, I've already told you that they're what defines species.
Wait a moment. If what you're suggesting were true, just by thinking, the genome could make changes to the genes it consists of and create new species.
Oh, what am I thinking? The genome doesn't have a brain.
The genome is a brain. It holds information. It tells the cell what to do. Here I propose, in the genome being able to think new species into existence is a new mechanism of evolution.
But how could a genome think? It's just molecules. How could molecules think?
Your brain's just molecules, yet you can think, can't you? But while you've been getting smarter for only 70 years, the genome's been getting smarter for 4 billion. It could have become a lot smarter than you.
Bunch of molecules smarter than me, eh?
Well, it may be new, this mechanism of yours, but what does it tell us we didn't know before? What questions does it answer? Well, it tells us who, the genome, and where, in the nucleus of the cell, and how, by defining and thinking new species into existence. Now, what and why? Let's answer those. What? What is it we most want to account for? What's most obvious about evolution?
Most obvious? Nothing about it was obvious at first. Now it all seems obvious.
No, what's most obvious? Shout out something about evolution. Quick, quick, anything.
Elephants, elephants. Once there were no elephants, now there are elephants. Evolution created elephants, and that goes for all other living creatures. There's nothing like that in the physical world. So, I suppose what's most obvious is evolution's creative, like us.
Ah, creative, yes. Like us? Maybe you've got things the wrong way round. Surely evolution must have become creative first. Then it could make us creative. Evolution was being creative long before we came along, and it made us, didn't it? If we're creative, that's because evolution's creative. Isn't that the way round it's got to be?
Well, I suppose you could say that.
Maybe we think because the genome can think. First the genome got to think, then it built thinking into us.
Hold on. That's just logic. I don't trust logic without some study of nature to back it up.
You take care of the study of nature. Let old Galileo here handle the logic. So, first the genome evolves so it can think somehow. Maybe evolving involves thinking. Then it builds thinking into us. Maybe thinking in us is something evolving. Maybe it's our thoughts evolving. Maybe that's what happens when we think. One thought evolves into another thought somehow. Maybe all kinds of mental processes, not just thinking, but consciousness, free will, being creative, all consist of thoughts evolving into other thoughts. Mr. Darwin, thinking equals evolving. What does that sound like to you?
Sounds like math to me. I don't do math and physics.
What I'm talking about is not math. It's not physics. What else is there besides physics? There are only two things, neither of which we understand very well, despite our respective revolutions. One, what it means that living creatures evolve. And two, our own conscious experience. Now, I have just combined these two things into one. Both of them are driven by processes of evolution going on inside some kind of mind.
You're talking about mind as if it was real. You can't just make up stuff like that. My God, people would think I was crazy if I went back and talked like that.
Yes, but you are talking to me, Galileo Galilei, and this is how I think. It was good enough for my revolution. Maybe it can help you with yours. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. What? What is it we want to account for? What is most obvious about us? We're merely one more creature the genome thought into existence. But it put a lot of thought into us, gave us upright posture, freed our hands for tool-making, gave us capacity for speech, huge increase in our brains, all at the same time, all in a few million years. Now, why? Why did it make us such exceptional creatures? Tell me, Mr. Darwin, are there any signs of this genome exploring?
Exploring? Well, there are reports of pre-adaptation, of creatures appearing to come pre-adapted for new environments.
Ah, of course. When the genome gets wind of a new environment, it can think up a new creature able to explore it in one go. No intermediates needed. Now, us. It equips us with wonderful new features, and it gives us mental powers like its own to make decisions and act for it. Why? What for? Look at those people down there, Mr. Darwin. What were they all pre-adapted for, eh? Something for you to mull over while you stand there, looking down.
I stood looking down for quite a while, trying to figure out what Galileo was talking about. Us? Pre-adapted? You're probably as puzzled as I was. To give you a little time to think about it, I'm going to take a small break to rest my voice. When I come back, I'll tell you how our conversation ended. What it means we evolved, Act 3.
Mr. Darwin has fulfilled his promise. The library is closed. Now, to get my way, I must rely on persuasion. My ideas I must repackage so they are simple enough for him to understand. Then I must persuade him to embrace them, and to return to Earth to disseminate them among his friends down there. But first, I must impress upon him the importance of his new mission. Mr. Darwin, your generosity in sharing with me your understanding of the natural world has convinced me that your evolution is a much more formidable challenge than was ours in physics. Evolution is entirely new, and seems to reach to the foundations of everything. How far has your revolution advanced, I asked myself, in relation to where we started? But once Newton came up with his grand theory of gravity, I stopped paying attention. Do, I beg you, tell me what happened to his theory after that.
Oh, it was very successful. Took 2 more centuries for someone else to come up with the right theory. Relativity, something about space being curved. No one understands it, the math, you know. So most of the time people make do with the theory of gravity and carry on as if it's still true. So, after all the time we spent on our evolution, it took another 2 centuries to fully understand it. Just to understand gravity, we had to create 3 entirely new concepts. I can well imagine coming up with this relativity took at least another 3. That would be 6 entirely new concepts altogether. It could take at least as many to fully understand evolution. 6 entirely new concepts? But that could take centuries. Well, yes, it could. Just being able to make a discovery does not necessarily mean you already have the concepts you need to understand it. The ancient Greeks knew about electricity, but they never did get to understand it. But suppose you and I, between us, could come up with just 3 new concepts. And suppose we presented these 3 new concepts to those people down there as an as-if theory, like gravity. Nature is as if our new theory of evolution is true. And suppose they adopted it as a make-do theory that they could use to come up with new questions that would help them arrive at the other new concepts required. Think how much that could contribute to the further success of your evolution. Don't you see what a great accomplishment it would be to tell them about our new theory and the 3 new ideas we came up with? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh. 3 new ideas we came up with? What do you mean? I thought we were just chatting. Please give me some credit. We came up with 3 new ideas. Listen carefully. I'm going to tell you about them again. Idea number 1. A new mechanism of evolution. The genome being intelligent, as it thinks it will make changes to the genes it's made of. Just as we, when we think, make changes to our brains, remember? Through those changes to its genes, it can think into existence new species of living creatures. Oh, yes, I remember. That was all very nice in theory, but are you actually saying the genome is intelligent? Doesn't that make it like God? Doesn't that put us back where I came in 2 centuries ago? The genome's nothing like a god. It exists only here on the earth, so it is not infinite. It can have existed for no longer than the earth itself, so it is not eternal. It did not create the universe. Most of its creations go extinct, so it is not all-knowing. And it cares maybe not at all for you and me individually. So no, I do not find it anything like a god. To me, it is more like one of us, dependent on a mind that's creative but fallible. Can you make do with so humble an agent of evolution, one so much like you yourself? Well, I suppose so. But why bring in mind? Isn't that sort of supernatural? And it's not necessary. In practice, you can't tell a world where people have minds from one where they don't, where they're driven by brain chemistry. They'll behave just the same. You can't tell the difference. Ah, well, you've learnt your lessons from this new science of yours. I see I will have to help you unlearn them.
I'm going to give you a choice. You are about to give a presentation on your materialist philosophy. You must choose between two audiences. One consists of people without mind, who will have no conscious awareness of anything you say, who will give responses generated directly from their brain chemistry. The people in the other audience do have minds. They will follow what you say in consciousness. They'll consciously weigh what you say against what they think, and of their own free will work out what questions to ask you. The two audiences look identical. Which one will you choose?
That does make a difference, doesn't it? I would like to think people were consciously experiencing what I was saying, able to compare it to what they already believed, and able to come up with feedback of their own free will. Consciousness can make a difference.
But it's so intangible. Chemistry in the brain, what someone does, that kind of thing is fixed and easy to understand. But conscious experience, it's so mysterious. How strange. To me, it's just the opposite. Look, you must have had an experience like this. Reading a letter from someone makes you feel curious about something. Then you think, I want to find out more to satisfy my feeling of curiosity. So you decide to satisfy your desire by referring to a book next to you. All those impressions you can trace, following one after another in consciousness, each drawing not on chemistry or behavior, but all directly on conscious feelings in mind. To me, that seems simple to understand. But once you've come to a decision and instructed your brain what to do, your brain chemistry takes over, and you see your hands reach over to pick up the book and open it. You just give the instruction, and it does it. But how it does it, you've no idea. The conscious part, though, you have control over. You can always change what happens next.
Can you? Can you really?
Of course you can. You can just decide what to think about, what to look at. Can't you? Even just by deciding to believe in mind or not to believe, you can change what happens. Believe in mind that you have conscious control over it, and you are likely to train it to build up powers within it that will enrich your old age. But deny mind, assume that nothing you think can make any difference, that everything's decided for you by brain chemistry. And how could it occur to you to train it? So no training, no powers, no mellow old age. You've made a difference just by deciding whether or not to believe in mind. But bear in mind, to be free to make that decision, you must have a mind to make it in.
Oh dear, I think you may be right. Mind does seem to exist after all.
Good. That will help you remember idea number one. The genome has mind. It is creative and conscious, has free will, and an intelligence capable of thinking into existence whatever creature it wants. Into us, for example, it chose to build some of its own creativity, consciousness, and free will. That's where we get them from. Now, idea number two. Thinking equals evolving.
Oh, I didn't understand any of that.
Well, pay attention. I'm going to tell you again. Just through accidents of history, we've ended up with two different traditions for talking about the same thing. One is a very ancient tradition we use for talking about our own conscious experience, what I think, what I feel, how I reached a decision. The other is a new tradition we're still making up for talking about evolution. What I did was to combine these two traditions for talking about mind and evolution into one. Once I did that, it was obvious. It must be true.
Well, I didn't think it was obvious.
Well, it was obvious to me. What made it so obvious was, it makes everything so simple. Here's what it says. It says there are only two kinds of things. On the one hand, there is matter and the physical processes that act on matter. On the other hand, there is mind and evolutionary processes operating in mind, either something being thought about or living creatures evolving. That is all you need to account for everything. Anything you can imagine. War, art, science, life, even conscious experiences themselves, they can involve only physical processes happening in matter and evolution happening in mind. There can be nothing else, nothing supernatural.
I don't know. It seems much too neat to me, too logical.
Well, here's something that may change your mind. Once you combine thinking with evolving, you have two ways of studying it. Not only can you study evolution from the outside, as you do now, through nature study, but you can also study it from the inside through your own conscious experience. Both ways. You'll be looking at the same process, but with two ways of studying that process instead of only one, you are bound to make much more rapid progress.
Well, that's all very well, but evolution doesn't exist out there in some kind of disembodied mind. Evolution's just a word we came up with to help us talk about where living creatures come from. Living creatures, they're out there in the field, wandering about. They're just flesh and blood bodies. They eat, they evolve. There's no mind involved.
So tell me, what do species consist of? They're real enough for you to have written a book entitled On the Origin of Species, where, except as thoughts in some kind of mind, can they exist?
I don't know. I know them when I see them, that's all.
Oh. Let us compromise. Think of mind as no more than an as-if theory, like gravity. The way we experience things, the creativity of nature, it's as if minds existed separate from matter, as if all evolution took place in such a mind. Just an as-if theory, merely a stepping stone we'll need on our way to arriving at a full understanding of evolution. Okay?
Well, merely a stepping stone. I suppose it could be helpful. All right, I can go along with that.
Good. So, idea number 2. Thinking equals evolving. Both of them take place in some kind of mind. Then you can account for everything in terms of only physical processes operating on matter and evolutionary processes operating in mind. Idea number 3. Pre-adaptation. Where does our meaning in life come from? It comes from whatever we have been pre-adapted for. Whatever we've been pre-adapted for, we are bound to embrace as our own meaning in life. And where does pre-adaptation come from? From the genome. Whatever the genome wants us to do, it will pre-adapt us for. By figuring out what we've been pre-adapted for, we can learn what the genome wants us to do, and so something else about our own meaning in life, whether we've yet become aware of it or not.
Oh, my goodness, you can pull a fast one with that. Meaning in life, indeed. You could just say anything. Give me an example.
We will one day, no doubt, visit the moon and the other planets. We are bound to, because such exploration is highly meaningful to us. Why is it so meaningful to us? Because the genome has pre-adapted us for space travel. How can we know we've been pre-adapted for space travel? Remember your friend Wallace pointing out how we humans come already equipped with the abilities we need to create civilization? With civilization, you get technology, metals leading to machines, and glass leading to instruments. Machines and instruments. Without them, spaceflight would be impossible. Through equipping us for civilization, the genome pre-adapted us for space travel. Why? So we would carry it to worlds where it has never been. Now, take each way we've been specially equipped. See what that pre-adapts us for, and what meaning in our life that implies. Little by little, we'll patch together a far more profound vision of the meaning of human life.
Wow! I suppose that does make some kind of sense. But it all seems terribly complicated. Aren't you setting evolution up to become just another highly technical branch of physics? Why would I bother? If physics alone could tell us how living creatures evolved and all about conscious thought, we'd already understand them, but we don't. To understand them, we obviously need a new source of wisdom. Could any source of wisdom compare with knowing how we were made? No. If we evolved, then the wisdom we need we'll find in the amazing machinery that drove our evolution. If we have consciousness, that will tell us how consciousness works. If we have free will, it must tell us how free will can be created. Well, if we're not going to get that wisdom through physics, where will we get it from?
We'll not get the wisdom we want through reason and logic alone. They can be no more than its servants. So where should we look? To evolution itself, from which we inherit our passion for meaning, our sense of awe and wonder, our dreams, our nightmares, even reason and logic themselves. Evolution is a tale full of events and accidents, adventures and tragedies, taking place over billions of years. Better for that would be your nature study, history, storytelling, the humanities. Maybe through some future combination of nature study and the humanities, we'll discover other powers in evolution just as wonderful as consciousness and free will, that we can add to the powers we already have. What A grand adventure that would be, bringing down into our own nature more of evolution's awesome creative powers.
Goodness, there is grandeur in that view of life. Nature study and the humanities together, rebuilding human nature from the ground up, on a firmer foundation, to greater heights. That's what I've really wanted all along.
Ah, my ideas he has embraced. Now, to persuade him to go down there to deliver them. Rebuilding human nature on a firmer foundation to greater heights. Do you realize how much grander that is than what you taught them evolution means? How much grandeur is there in merely being better adapted to the environment? When you first told me evolution was driven for selection for being well adapted to the environment, I thought you were joking. Whatever the mechanism of evolution is, it's bound to result in creatures being well adapted to their environment. Otherwise, they'd be dead. Don't you see? Adaptation to the environment is merely an inevitable byproduct of evolution. You saw a byproduct of evolution and mistook it for the cause.
I'm not sure I understand.
Think of a horse pulling a cart along a street. Every so often the horse drops a pile of dung on the street. Those piles of dung, they're not what drives the cart. Adaptation to the environment, that's like the piles of dung. It's not the kind of thing that can drive a process like evolution. It's not going to be the cause of evolution. It can be no more than a mere byproduct. Pulling a cart takes a horse. You need to find the creature that's actually driving evolution.
Oh, my goodness. I never thought of that. Yes, whatever the cause of evolution is going to result in adaptation. And I made that the cause of evolution. Oh, one day they may realize that down there, and I'll look pretty silly. How embarrassing. Oh, well, it can't be helped. Down there today, everyone believes in Darwin. I don't think I could change their minds, no matter what I said or did.
Well, back in my day, everyone believed in Aristotle, and I changed their minds. If I can do that for Aristotle, I can certainly do it for Darwin. Has it occurred to you, your mechanism of natural selection could affect people in ways they and you might deeply regret? Instead of it spreading a new wisdom as you hoped, it could spread instead fatalism. The materialist philosophy by itself can never be more than a footnote to a particular scientific method, but in the form of your theory that we evolved through purely physical mechanisms, and as a result we are determined, it could spread fatalism to everyone, everywhere, leading to a new global dark age.
Oh, how terrible. Shouldn't someone warn those people down there about this risk of fatalism? Me? Oh, I would go, but I don't think it's something a gentleman should do. Someone with a position, alone. without family or friends to back them up. So no, I can't go.
What would make him want to go? Suppose you could be responsible for something even worse than fatalism, a worldwide reversion to barbarism of the most abominable sort. Would you go then? Here's what natural selection says. Some creatures will pass more of their genes on to future generations than others, and that's what drives evolution. Now, what will most help creatures pass on their genes? Being better adapted to the environment? No. All that matters is surviving to adulthood, having the most progeny, and ensuring those progeny survive to breed in the next generation. And what will that select for? To survive to adulthood, aggression towards one's own kind, murder. To have the most progeny, imposing oneself most forcefully on the opposite sex, rape. And to ensure one's own progeny survive long enough to breed, murder of one's fellow's offspring while protecting one's own, infanticide. What natural selection would select for isn't being better adapted to the environment. It will be murder, rape, and infanticide.
Well, it's not my fault if that's what drives evolution.
But it's not. That's not what natural populations are like. Even wolves collaborate and support each other, are faithful to their partners, care for each other's progeny. So obviously, it cannot be natural selection that drives evolution.
Well, then there's no harm done. I was just wrong, that's all.
But how about your fellow human beings? Doesn't the logic of natural selection make survival of one's genes the ultimate measure of one's success? Won't people who accept your theory feel tempted to excel at the very worst of behaviors mankind can imagine? Murder, rape, infanticide?
That never occurred to me. Of course, it wouldn't occur to a gentleman. Competition, play the game, survival of the fittest, adaptation to the environment. That's what I thought of. I never thought of how other people might interpret it. I do see the logic you've pointed out, hidden in my theory. I do see how natural selection could seem to justify murder, rape, and infanticide. Oh. But am I responsible for what other people make of my theory? I don't think so.
Oh. Then think instead of all the good you could do. In place of natural selection, you have a new and much more inspiring origin story to offer them. Our new mechanism of the intelligent genome.
It would be like natural selection all over again, having to endure all that fuss over a theory. I couldn't stand it.
Oh, what can I do? Who should we send in your place? Who would not be embarrassed by all the gratitude those people down there would shower on him?
Gratitude? What would they be grateful for?
Your theory of evolution is acting like the cap on a bottle, keeping from mankind all the potential for meaning of us having evolved. Whoever removes that cap, giving everyone access to all that meaning, they will hail as a genius for having carried your evolution to its grand conclusion. Who will this be? If no one else will make the sacrifice, then I will go.
Hold on. If someone must make the sacrifice, then perhaps it should be me after all.
You are right. It must be you. They know you. They trust you. Look, I must go, and so must you. You have a new mission to fulfill, a new passion to communicate. Start by pointing out what wonderful talents we already come with, vision and hearing through which we can appreciate the finest art, the greatest symphonies. Ask them, why do we come with senses vastly more capable than you'd need merely to be adapted to the environment? To answer that question, introduce our new ideas. Express your passion. Open your heart. Pour out your deepest feelings. Hold on.
I am British, you know, not too good at that feeling stuff.
Don't hold back. You are about to set in motion a new renaissance. Promise your people that through learning how we evolve, they will develop today, and mankind will inherit forevermore wonderful new mental powers. Promise them they will earn for themselves eternal glory. All future ages will look back to them and marvel at their audacity.
Oh, wait a minute, don't get too carried away.
Well, can you tell them just what happened here? How we arrived at this grand vision together? You talking to me, Galileo Galilei. Can you do that?
Well, I think so. I think I can do that.
Then farewell, my friend. I wish you every success. Don't forget, remember me, Galileo Galilei, to your friends down there. Ciao. Do I have a story to tell you? You won't believe your ears.
So I told him I'd tell you all about our conversation, and how much help he was in coming up with these new ideas. And that's what I've tried to do here, today. For your attention, thank you. That's the end of What It Means We Evolved. For more information, visit the website evolvedself.com.